You're watching Reddit Aliens, the weekly compilation. No relief, no breaks. Just story after story sinking deeper into the dark. If you're listening with headphones, good. If you're alone, better. Enjoy now and subscribe. What is your My House is Haunted story? When I was little, I had a loft bed with a desk underneath. I've always been a pretty heavy sleeper. I could fall asleep at a concert, so it was strange when I began waking up at 3 a.m. every morning. What was even more strange were the noises coming from the attic. Shuffling, knocking, boxes moving. My 9-year-old brain rationalized it as an animal or bird that had gotten in. After a few weeks of shit sleep, I decided to knock back on my ceiling, shave in a haircut pattern because I was bored and hadn't interacted with whatever was in the attic. I waited in silence for a few minutes until I was about to fall back asleep, and then I heard it. From the ceiling, a foot from my face. It knocked back the pattern. Every night when I woke up, I'd knock and sometimes get a response. It gradually stopped over the years, but I still wake up at 3 a.m. every night. It's weird, but it only happens in my room. I sleep fine in hotels and other houses. 13 years later, and I've just been getting weird vibes around my house. I feel like I'm being watched. I sometimes hear someone saying my name, most notably before bed, and whatever is said, it is very close to my ear. I can feel their breath as they whisper, and it freaks me out so much that it takes hours to get back to sleep. The shuffling in the attic also started up again, but I don't want to knock back anymore. There's a lot of weird shit that happens. Things get moved. My dogs and cat stare at the same blank spot, but these are just what's been currently happening. I just don't know what to do anymore. A pastor died of a heart attack in the house I grew up in before we owned it. When I was a baby, I was sick with croup. Apparently, in the night, I was having trouble breathing and was beginning to suffocate. The ceiling light fixture in my nursery fell out of the ceiling and smashed on the floor, waking my parents, who found me choking. Parents are absolutely convinced the pastor's ghost had intervened and saved my life. My childhood home was definitely haunted. I have a drawing potentially made by a ghost. I could feel it when there's a presence somewhere. There's a palpable sense of being watched. There's a tension and paranoia in the air that lingers and can even simmer into full-blown terror. It makes you feel very vulnerable. When I was a young child, I remember seeing glowing red eyes hanging in the air in my desk living room. I thought our house had werewolves or vampires. There was a phase in 3rd grade when glowing orbs would hang out in my room for several minutes at a time, which I interpreted as aliens. My child mind was trying to make sense of things, but I definitely had a fear of the dark, specifically in our house. Most places were fine in the dark, but in our house, I always felt like I was being watched by something with malicious or, at best, neutral intentions. Paranormal things ramped up for me in high school, but to remain chronological, I had a cousin stay at our house one summer while most of us were on vacation between my 7th and 8th grades. My cousin Billy was helping my dad with various projects. One night, my cousin was going to bed in one bedroom, later dubbed the spooky room. Outside in the dark, he saw a figure leave our garage and entire our house. My dad, right? Billy, help me. My cousin heard my father shouting. Billy rushed to check on my father. My father had been sleeping and was irritated by Billy's presence. Billy went back to bed, only to hear it again. Billy, help. Again, cousin Billy rushed to check on my father, who was fine and confused by Billy's urgency. Billy slept on the couch that night. I didn't learn about this until years later. A couple years later, my brother moves away to college, and I move into his old bedroom, the spooky room. It's my freshman year of high school. I was always particularly creeped out by this room, but hey, new changes are often intimidating. One morning, I wake up to see a skull perfectly drawn in the dust on the window across from where my head lies when I sleep. This was the layer of dust facing the inside of the room, not the outside. No one had access to the room except me and my parents, who were not pranksters by any means. I show my room and wipe it away. A couple weeks later, I'm studying in that bedroom. It's night, and the lights are on. so the windows turn into mirrors. I look up from my bed toward that skull window, and I see in the reflection a white silhouette standing behind me. I hold my gaze for maybe 10 seconds, just trying to grasp what I'm looking at. I eventually turn my head around and see nothing. I look back at the window and see nothing in the reflection. I sleep on the couch for the next few nights. A couple more weeks later, I'm lying in bed, listening to a late-night radio show. Lights are off. Looking through that same skull window, I see a similar white silhouette outside stride past my window. I sleep on the couch for several more nights. Over the course of weeks, I see more things drawn on dust of the windows. Generally, it's scribbles and shapes. I'm scared they might be some sort of curse or something, so I wipe them away. Out of curiosity, I put a sticky note on the window that says, "Please write below." Several days later, a perfect circle appears around the note as if someone had put the base of a paint can up against the surface. This was like the finger drawings I had seen earlier, but one drawing did really stand out. I decided to recreate it in MS Paint before I wiped it away. Over the years, I've shared this with friends and colleagues, and they mostly come to the same conclusion as I did before. I tell them my interpretation. But yeah, for the majority of high school, I slept with the light on. I avoided that side of the house like the plague, little things here and there, but nothing huge, until it's senior year of high school. I'm in the living room with my mother watching TV, and the clothes dryer finishes. This dryer is directly down the hallway from the spooky room. I suck it up and head over to empty the machine, getting my usual feeling of immense dread and paranoia as I enter that side of the house. I bend over and start unloading the laundry, and my mind goes blank, and I lose control over my motor functions. My arms go limp, and beyond my control, my body stands up, and I hear a masculine voice take a deep breath and hiss in my ear. I immediately regain control of my body, and I GTFO. Around that time period, my aunt comes to stay with us for a month or two. She has no idea what I've experienced there, but literally on her first day there, the bathroom door slams hard on her, and she immediately has us smudge the house to ward off whatever's there. I've experienced other paranormal things elsewhere, and I've had a couple of weird experiences where I think my dead relative warned me about a couple imminent death in the family. My house is super haunted, but it's too many little instances to put in one story. I guess I'll just go with the most recent one. A few nights ago, I heard running upstairs, despite being home alone. I thought it was my cat, but then he came downstairs and the running continued. I was a little spooked, but it's not the worst thing that's happened in this house. The running lasted for quite a while, plus a few knocks. The next morning, I was cleaning upstairs in that room, and my cat crawled into a box of fabrics. I thought he was being cute, so I said, "Aw," and started to pull out my phone to take a picture. While I was still reaching for my phone, I heard a mocking "Aw" right behind me. I completely froze and just let myself process it for a few seconds before checking the room. Obviously, I was still alone. That one spooked me a little. My parents bought at this point, 110-year-old house about 10 years ago, and it feels everybody but me has had a paranormal experience in the house. My parents said they've seen a short, kind of chubby ginger kid appear at random spots in the house. Sometimes just standing in the washer-dryer room and vanishing. Sometimes they'd see him at the top of the stairs, and he'd walk towards my room, hooray, and disappear. Eventually, my parents were tired of it, so they had my grandfather, very Christian guy, come and bless the house, and the appearances stopped. My brother has talked about staying up late at night and hearing someone walk up the stairs. They're very old, so they are very squeaky. Walk to his closed door, jiggle the doorknob, original doors, so there was a quarter turn of play in the knobs, a bunch, stop, and walk back down the steps and stop. Didn't hear a door open or close. They just stopped at the bottom of the steps. My mom has also described seeing something peek out from around the corner at her as she's sitting watching TV at night. She thinks it's probably just her slowly falling asleep and seeing things, but it's still unsettling for her. There was a period of time where the mudroom door would kind of flex randomly, like a change of air pressure. This usually happens whenever someone opens an outside door and closes it, but nobody ever was near a door, or the doors were locked. Probably just some weird phenomena caused by an old house, but still creepy. And yet, here I am, who probably spent the most time up and alone in the middle of the night in that house, not seeing or hearing anything that wasn't explainable, from night terrors and sleep paralysis, which I've always had at multiple houses. In a basement apartment when I was in grad school, the landlady lived in the main house, and while she herself was super nice and cool, her house always felt really off to me. However, she charged a reasonable amount of rent, and I was only 2 miles from school. About a week or two after I moved in, I had gone to bed, and the apartment was pitch black at night. If my landlady ever wanted to speak to me, I would hear the doors above the stairs unlock, and she would call out to me. One night, I heard movement on the steps, but I didn't hear her unlock the doors, and it was probably 2 a.m. She certainly didn't call me saying she needed to talk to me. I hear these heavy steps descending the stairs, but I'm so scared that I shrink further in my bed to hide. The floor begins to creak towards my door, and then nothing for a few seconds. I'm not sure if it is safe to relax and go back to bed. Then I hear the door knob start to turn. My fear makes me so scared that I pull the covers over my head to hide. I prayed the whole time under the covers. The next thing I know, it's finally morning. I stayed in that apartment for 2 years. When it was my graduation, I slept in a hotel because there was no room for my family to sleep. That night in the hotel was the first restful sleep I had in what felt like forever. My friend Carl's last apartment had 2 ghosts. One was a little girl who would play with your hair while you were hanging out in the living room, as well as running along the vertical blinds, making them swing back and forth. The second I never saw or heard, but I did feel him. One night, I locked myself out of my apartment. We lived in the same complex, one building over from each other, so I asked to crash at Carl's place for the night while he went to work. But he had told me, don't go into his room. There is a male ghost who will tell you that you don't belong in there. His previous roommate had let several friends crash in his room, and a tall black shadow opened the door and said get out to all of them. Freaked him the hell out. So here I am on the couch in the living room, head on the end of the couch that looks down the hall to the bedrooms and bathroom. I swear I was being watched. Then it hit me. I needed to pee, and the bathroom is right across the hall from Carl's bedroom. Fantastic. So I slowly creep down the hall, and about 5 feet from my goal, I said, hey man, I just need to use the bathroom. Then it felt like a cloud of energy got pulled back into my bedroom, despite the door being closed. So I did my thing and hauled ass back to the couch, but I put my head on the other end of the couch. Nothing outstanding, but just a really creepy vibe. On the positive side, at least Carl had someone looking out for him. Growing up, I used to live in a fairly large 2-story house. I'm pretty sure it was built in the early 1900s because when we moved in during the mid-90s, and Dad told me it was 100 years old at that point. It was a really cool house with a huge backyard, but there were some really creepy parts. The basement, of course, was dark, unfinished, and had 2 small rooms facing each other. One of the rooms was creepy. It had these weird dividers on the floor made of plywood, kind of how you would imagine stalls in a horse stable, but on a much smaller scale. On the landing heading to the second floor was a big door about halfway up the wall that led to an attic space. The door wasn't attached in any way, it was just leaned up against the jamb. The attic was creepy. Because of the walls were newspaper clippings of people with their eyes scratched out, like that is some super cliche horror movie thing, but seeing it in real life was spooky. There were always a lot of weird noises in that house. It was old, so it's to be expected. We would hear creaks and knocks, sometimes the occasional bang, but we would rarely see anything really strange. It didn't seem like a haunted house at all. That is until one day, my younger brother and my cousin were playing with a webcam, making a video on Windows Movie Maker. In the video, my brother starts adjusting the camera, and as soon as he moves his hand away, you can very clearly see something moving behind them, which quickly ducks behind them and disappears. My brother didn't notice, but my cousin did. He quickly turned around to check, but didn't see anything. We watched that video over and over, and I eventually noticed that you can see whatever it is actually materialize while my brother is moving the camera around. Whatever it was looked kind of like the head of a bat, but about the size of a fist. I've seen and heard a lot of weird things aside from that, but that was the only real experience from that creepy-ass house. Apart from specters appearing at random intervals, the most chilling was the night before Christmas. For background, the spirit in our home had proved to be very possessive of me and kept attempting to keep me from my boyfriend and win my attention, maybe affection. Every night, when he would be working into the wee hours, I fell asleep in our room with the bedroom door unlocked to grant him easy access. Every night, when he got home, it was firmly locked. I heard him calling for me in other rooms while showering, and would emerge to find the house always empty and BF at the gas station or in the backyard. It would sit next to me on the bed, appear to me while bathing, rap on the wall while I was alone, always after my attention. My then boyfriend was deployed, and I was just starting on a glass of wine, settling onto the living room couch. We had decorated right before he left, but I was lonely and hadn't heard from him in a day or two. A few tears slipped, and I heard a sound. No branch had moved. There was no breeze or fan, but a glass ball had gently dropped from the tree onto the wood floor without breaking. I stared at it, and it stayed in place for a second under the tree. Then it slowly rolled 4 feet in my direction over the lip of a thick, heavy rug, which shouldn't have been possible, and stopped directly in front of my feet. The first of many gifts to cheer me up. I received a vintage children's card, a queen of spades with torn edges, and yellowed paper shortly after. I don't know where it came from. It appeared one day, and when I would throw it out, it would appear somewhere else. The garage, the windowsill, under the bed. One time, my boyfriend threw it out, as if in angry retaliation. When I was in the bath that evening, the spirit of a woman sat on my chest, pressing me into the water. I couldn't move. It was like a night terror, but with risk of drowning. She had such a twisted, hateful face. After a moment of clawing at the sides of the tub, I was released. We sold the house earlier this year and moved across the country. We found out that the previous owner had been a depressed, manic hoarder who kept animals she seemingly abused in her home. I don't know what had happened to her, if it's guaranteed she died in the house or what, but the spirit that dwelled there was the unhappiest thing I'd ever encountered. I almost feel sorry for it. I lived in this big pre-war building in New York City, and every night after I put my daughter to sleep in her room, I would lay in my bed and watch TV. The way my bed was angled, I could see a sliver of the hallway out of the corner of my eye. I would always see this tall shadow pass by the door, and it would jar me. I would always look over, but see nothing after that. After a few years, I got so used to it, I didn't even flinch anymore. In fact, I had honestly started to believe I just had some sort of vision problem that caused me to see the shadow in my peripheral vision. Eventually, we moved out. But a week before we did, my daughter and I were just hanging out in my bed one night watching TV. All our boxes were pretty much packed. The whole apartment was ready to go. I was laying on the bed in my usual spot, and my daughter was laying at the foot of the bed playing with her dolls. Again, my vision problem acted up, and I saw the shadow out of the corner of my eye. I didn't flinch or look over. I hadn't in years. I was so used to it. But all of a sudden, my 8-year-old child goes, "Who was that?" Holy fuck. I jumped up out of the bed. You saw that? What's the scariest thing that has happened to you? I was maybe 7 or 8 when I went to a big family reunion at a hotel ballroom. I remember sneaking away from the main hall where everyone was and going through a door that led to a smaller empty room with chairs stacked along the wall. I crossed the room and went through another door and found a long hallway. I skipped down the hallway and turned back and saw nothing but a row of doors. I tried to remember which one I came through. I kept trying to open doors. Most were locked. One opened into a dark room. One opened into like a stage with rows of empty seats filled with cardboard cutouts of people laughing. Something about them was horrifying, and I suddenly felt like someone was watching me, so I ran away. I kept running and running, trying to find my way back, only finding empty dark rooms every time I opened a door. It felt like a nightmare that would not end. I can't remember exactly how I got back. I think my uncle found me, but that experience stayed with me. I'm 50, but I still occasionally have nightmares about it, bad dreams in which something is chasing me through those empty rooms. Deserted hotels and long hallways with doors still freak me out, too. I was at a Houston Rockets basketball game. Before the game, I had eaten at a seafood restaurant with my date. We had nice seats, 5th row from courtside. Half an hour into the game, I started feeling sweaty. I told my date that I was not well and that we need to go. She was very unhappy. I dropped her off first. Then I was driving home and I had to pass by downtown Houston on my way home. I saw the sign for a hospital and I have no idea why. I decided to take the exit and go to the hospital. When I got to the building, I drove to multiple levels trying to find a spot, parked my car, and then walked to where the emergency entrance was. The last thing I remember is walking towards the registration desk close to the entrance of the emergency room. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed with drips attached to my arm. I'd been out for almost 4 hours. The doctor later told me that my blood pressure had really fallen, and I'd almost gone into anaphylactic shock. If I had driven home, there is no way I would have survived. Now I keep an EpiPen with me and all the time. I was 13, and a uniformed police officer came to my house. I was home alone. My parents had left to get my siblings from camp an hour ago. I thought I was being told they had all died in a horrible car accident, and I preemptively just burst into tears. He came to drop off a wallet my dad had lost last week. It was both the scariest thing that ever happened to me and one of the most embarrassing. I got my tonsils removed when I was like 8. Something went kinda wrong, and I woke up the next morning with my bed covered in blood from head to waist. I tried to get up, but I almost fainted and started vomiting coagulated blood. I was already pretty scared, but then the doctor that was checking up on me told me it's a small miracle I'm not dead. It took me a long while to be able to go to sleep and not seriously consider the possibility that this may be my last night. Carpopital spasm. Was extremely hungover, breathing hard and trying not to puke in the car. Suddenly my jaw locked. It felt like my head was being squeezed super hard. Then my arms locked up at this weird angle and I couldn't move anything. I've never had a seizure in my life, but I knew I was going to start seizing if I didn't get help. Turns out it happens when you get too much oxygen and your muscles lock to get it out of your system, and a seizure was in fact the next step. I crashed my mom's car about 2 years ago. I ran off the side of the road and I crashed in between 2 trees. I was going 45 and a 25. I learned my lesson from that. I think I might have gotten out with fractured ribs from it, but I totaled my mom's car. I think the scariest part about it was that I knew in that moment that I could have died, and to this day I've been watching my speed and trying not to kill myself in the meantime. I hate myself for crashing my mom's car. We got her another car, but still I can't believe I did something that stupid. It's also one of the scariest things I ever did, because I could have died. My first psychotic episode was diagnosed a long time ago, but never also with psychosis. But yeah, I woke up in a hospital and knew right away where I was and just decided to wait until a doctor came in. I found out I was unconscious for 2 days, and it took me a month to no longer use a cane or walker as I was found passed out in a field and had extreme dehydration. Then all the memories of the episode came back, and then 1 month later, I had a second one happen. Shit is scary as fuck. I almost got trampled by a herd of horses. When I was about 12 or 13, I rode horses a lot and loved to go out to the pasture, swing up on my horse, and then just sit on him as we walked around grazing. One day, I did this and he got right next to the fence and was cropping grass by the base of the fence posts. As he brought his head up, the backs of his ears touched the hot wire that lined the top fence railing. Shocked the ever-loving shit out of him. As we spun around, I grabbed his mane. I had hopped on him without bridle or saddle and hung on for dear life, right as he shot off like a rocket. Well, him spooking scared the entire herd. So as he went flying, a dozen other horses joined in behind him for a wild gallop. At one point, we got to a really rocky area and we had trouble navigating the small boulders at mad gallop. He tripped and I freaked out and let go. I flew into a pile of big rocks, and then the entire herd of horses came over the top of me. I honestly should have been broken by the fall into the rocks, and I definitely should have been trampled by all the horses that went over the top of me, but miraculously, I was just slightly banged up and winded. I still don't know how those odds worked out. Shadow, I'm sorry your ears got shocked, but that was a dick move. Almost dying from a semi-fatal disease. Spending 3 weeks in a chemically induced coma, discovering on waking up that I'd missed my birthday, then having to train my legs to walk again, hands to write, and so on. being regularly taken as a hostage when I was between 5 and 7 years old. My biological father would grab me and shove me in the car when he knew he would be running from the cops. His mindset was that they would be less likely to take aggressive actions with a child in the car. I also remember one time that he took me along. He took me to some stranger's house and left me with those people for several days. Asshole. I was in the backyard with my mom when I was 8. Phone rang inside the house. She goes to get it. Phone stops ringing. A few seconds after, I hear her make a sound that I've never heard anyone else make. 2 syllables, and it sounded somehow like something hit her in the gut, but also with a scared quality. I drop what I'm doing and run inside. I turn the corner, and she's on the ground holding the phone in one hand and trying to use the wall to claw her way back to standing. The quotes will be her, the text will be me. How did it happen? Mom? Where? It's okay, Mom. Is it bleeding? Mom, it's okay. No, it isn't. Your sister's been shot in the head. So that moment right there, that was too big to take in, but also I felt instantly end the life and family I was going to have forever. Just a few pounds of pressure on a trigger, some gunpowder and a hollow point. That's how you kick a family into an alternate timeline, a bad one. And they never stop wanting to go back to the right one. We're always aware of where we are and where we should be. Since then, I've been in fights, I was attacked with a knife, I was nearly robbed at gunpoint. Every phobia I had before that day disappeared. Nothing else has ever compared to that fear. In August last year, I experienced an episode of sleep paralysis. My mind woke up, but my body didn't. I couldn't move or talk, couldn't open my eyes. I started freaking out and hyperventilating. My husband woke up thinking I was having a nightmare. He tried to wake me up. I couldn't communicate to him that I was awake. The best I could do was make a guttural noise in my throat. I was limp, could feel my mouth was opened and couldn't close it. He then realized I would make a noise whenever he spoke. He asked if I was awake. I responded with the noise. He said do it twice if I was awake. I did it twice. He asked if I could move. I made the noise once. Finally getting through to him was a relief for me, but was a whole new nightmare for him. He thought I was having a stroke. He called an ambulance. Halfway to the hospital, my body started to wake up. By the time we arrived at the hospital, I felt normal, but I had been in that state for 20 minutes, the most terrifying 20 minutes of my life. I almost died in a car accident at 17. We were turning left and a woman ran the light. I remember hearing my friend say, "Okay, I'm gonna go." And then I saw the huge white SUV coming straight for me. I blacked out for a bit. The horn was honking. I was bleeding everywhere and disoriented. A woman with extremely long nails helped pull glass out of my ear and asked me for my phone number so she could call my parents. It took forever for the firefighters to get me out. I was scared and alone because my friend got out pretty easily. I remember the firefighters talking to me while I was covered with a blue tarp so they could use the jaws of life to take the door off. They took me to the trauma center downtown in an ambulance, and it was the bumpiest, roughest ride I can remember. I was badly in shock. My BP was only 60/30, and my pulse was very low too. I made it out with some nasty scarring that I have to this day over 15 years later, but I'm alive, so that should count for something. I was a full-time journalist at the time, making shit money, and so I threw myself into the work to compensate for the lack of pay, and I collected quite a collection of hate mail in my inbox from folks involved in my investigative stories. I also wrote a huge series on a specific state government taking farmland through eminent domain, and some higher-up folks pretty pissed at me. One time, coming home from a town meeting in a small, remote area that was rife with a juicy zoning board dispute, which I'm quite certain many people knew I would attend, I was driving on a small, narrow road that was used frequently but was not great, and 2 black SUVs with no license plates and no lights sped up on me and ran me off the road. Like there is no other way to put it other than that they boxed me in and forced me off the road into a ravine. They then sped off. My car and I were not hurt, but it fucked my entire night up. It was fucking terrifying. I have no idea why they did it to this day, and trying to guess why just makes me feel like Rorschach. My friend was driving. I was in passenger, turning down the first of 3 hairpins to get back down switchbacks, headed to a party on a beach, and he says, "The brakes don't work." I laughed and said, "Shut up," as I heard clack, clack, clack. Laugh turned upside down since his panic was immediately visible. We were too young to know about downshifting, and the owner's mother, his girlfriend's car, apparently knew about the brakes that would randomly not work, so e-brake wasn't an option. We started freaking out of sea. I estimate we reached about 60 miles per hour at the end of that first switchback, jumped the small rounded curb into the forest after simultaneously yelling, "I love you, man, LOL. We hit this giant log, a section of a 5-foot diameter tree in the middle of the path, which I always used to curse out because walking down by foot for all the parties before, it was smack in the middle of the path on a cliff. If we didn't hit that tree section and safely settled on its far side, I may not be typing this story right now, if you catch my drift. Besides another war story from Iraq, I have one particular story that I never forgot as a child. It was me, 6, brother 8, and my mom stopping to pick up some dry cleaning. This was back in the early 90s, FYI. My mom just left us in the car so she could just run inside and grab the clothes and then return, 2 minutes max. As my mom was walking out the door, a big man ran up to her and ripped the keys out of her hand and started running to our car. He got in the driver's seat, and my brother and I started screaming and tried to punch and shove the guy out of the car. He starts it up and pulls ahead. My mom dropped the clothes and was running up to the car. The man driving turned the car off and pulled the e-brake, then proceeded to get out of the car. Confused, my mom asked him what the hell he was doing. Apparently, her car was rolling back down the hill into oncoming traffic. The guy actually saved our lives. We went from thinking we were being kidnapped to being saved. It was such a mind F for everyone. We thanked him though. Nice guy. What's the weirdest unsolved crime in your town, old or new? Nowhere near the scale of disappearing children or Nazi collaborators, but my hometown's biggest mystery is who keeps shitting in the holes at the golf course. Person has been doing it for more than 20 years. Every 2 to 3 months, there's a hole that's been shat in. So not exactly from a small town, but it's baffling. Happened this year. A man rented a room at a guest house. When he left, the host went to go clean or prepare the room for the next occupant. The room was covered in blood. In the shower, there was a chair with a pool of blood. It is assumed the person died in the chair. So the baffling part is that there is a camera trained in the room's door. The man entered and left alone without a speck of blood on him. The authorities assume the blood belonged to a woman whose chopped up body was found in a nearby dam. Blood tests came back, and it doesn't. Where I grew up, they found a dude who was buried under the cement in a building. No history or information about him. It's clear that he got in some deep trouble with someone. About 30 years ago, a refuse worker found the badly burned body of an 18-month-old boy amongst the bags and recycling. Forensics deduced that due to the condition of his liver, he died less than a week before his body was found. Hospital and medical records were used to establish that nobody in the county was missing a child. He doesn't have a name on his gravestone. Edit. It was in Cumbria, England. The police likely didn't retain a DNA sample, or we might have heard something about familial DNA by now. The local police aren't very good. Look up the case of Poppy Worthington as an example. Most local people assume he died of SIDS, then his parents panicked and tried to conceal his body. Whoever did it must have had an element of local knowledge in order to know where to put the corpse. I found out my grandma played cards with the mob in a liquor store basement. I was reading a news article on a cold case from the former owner disappearing for an English assignment, and my grandma kinda just frowned. Told me she used to play cards with him and never paid his debts. 1973. My 4th grade buddy Guy Heckle disappeared during a Boy Scout camping trip. They found his coat, that was all. Not another clue after all these years. Man got kicked out of a bar 3 years ago this December and went missing. Nobody has come forward with tips at all. He went missing from a fairly busy part of town too. Late 90s. A natural gas compressor station was built next door to me. Entire neighborhood protested it hard, but we were just dumb farmers and gas companies have money. Shortly after it was built, in the middle of the night, it sprung a leak. Compressed gas spewed into the air like a geyser, and there was now a jet-black cloud next door. Not that I could see much anyway at that hour. The sound it made was so loud, it would make a foghorn sound like a squeaky toy. Anyway, we evacuated. GTFO to the other side of town to some family and watched the news. Apparently it ended quickly enough. They estimated $13 million worth of natural gas was shot into the environment. So we go back. Reporters talk to my dad and stuff. Then 2 men show up, hand something to each news company, and everyone leaves immediately. My family and my neighbors are standing there like, WTF? Where did the reporters go? Within the hour, it was no longer on the news. If you Google it, you'll find no trace of it. They just made that story disappear. In my hometown, there was a rich family who were rumored to have gotten their gains during World War II by working with the Japanese forces. They had large estates, mansions, and were just ridiculously rich. One day, the entire family disappeared, and their houses and most of their properties were either burned down, destroyed, or missing. No one knows where they went or if they are even alive. The most likely explanation was that they lost a lot of favor and money, so they either ran away or killed themselves deep in the mountains. They also left large amounts of land, which were then given to either the previous owners or new owners. No other family member has returned, and this was about 30 years ago when it happened. A family of about 20, and they just disappeared overnight. Weird? Nah. Fucked up? Yup. 100 feet from the house I lived in at the time, a little boy was hit by a car in broad daylight, killed him instantly. The town rallied and tried to find the person that did it for months. It was all over Facebook and newspapers. Had a $500,000 reward for information. Whole town knows who it was. Not even a question. Still set as an unsolved crime, even though the person responsible had their truck washed and cleaned professionally and fixed by the local body shop. For the record, he's a judge. So yeah. Story from my grandpa. Small farm town, Nebraska in the 60s. A guy was found burnt alive in his car, hands wire tied to the steering wheel. It ruled as a suicide. Most of the town assumed that the guy owed gambling debts to some mob in Chicago or the like, and the guy wasn't exactly loved in the small town, so there was no real looking into it. A police officer in the 1930s responded to a call around midnight on Christmas Day. The wife woke up and he told her he'd be back, only that he had disappeared entirely and did not come back home. The car was found abandoned with no indication of his whereabouts. The local theory is that he was murdered and his body was disposed of in the leather tanning factory. Back in 2001, a friend of my friend had been secretly chatting online with a guy from Canada. They had made plans to meet up in Windsor or Detroit. A few days later, her body was found dumped in the woods. After doing some digging, police got a hold of the Canadian guy. He said he went to meet her, but she never showed, so he assumed she had stood him up. His story checked out. One suspect was this coworker, but a few months later, he did a murder-suicide to his mom, so they could never get the truth out of him. It's been a cold case ever since. It was him. In 1999, 2 teenage girls left to go to a party, ended up in different town, called home to say they would be late, and never came home. The car was found the next day on the side of the road. Their bodies were in the trunk, both shot at point-blank range. An arrest was made a couple years ago, but thanks to COVID, court cases are backlogged, so still waiting on that. They were a year younger than me, so needless to say, it really stuck with me over the years. Good old Belle Gunness. One thing the town I'm from is known for. She was a serial killer in the late 1800s into the early 1900s. Would claim she was a wealthy widow looking for a husband. When interested men would arrive, she would murder them. Eventually, families began to suspect her, so when authorities were closing in, she staged her death by killing her children and a maid, if I remember right. Then she burnt her farmhouse down, and the maid's body was assumed to be Belle. Later, authorities realized she escaped when the skeleton they assumed was hers didn't match her recorded height. She got away and nobody ever found her again. Many years ago, a house up the street from us burnt down. By the time firefighters got there, it was completely engulfed and a new home would have to end up being built. The man who lived there set it ablaze on purpose not long before going upstairs and shooting himself. Although his house was in complete destruction, with the fire yet to be put out, nobody expected him to be alive. This turned out to be true, but what they weren't expecting was that his body wasn't burned at all. The flames had avoided his body completely. It's unsolved because no one really knows why he killed himself or what the purpose was of burning down his house in the process. It's also a mystery as to how the fire didn't reach him. TLDR. Man killed himself after setting his home on fire with no one knowing why. Oh yes, my family is from a small town where a prominent cult founder was born, a town of about 1,000. Back 25-30 years ago, my uncle was on city council when the cult came to town and offered boatloads of money to build a shrine and improve infrastructure. They didn't have the bad reputation at this point quite yet that they do now. The majority of city council was drooling over the cash, but my uncle 12 angry maned the situation, seeing the writing on the wall that this was a step off a cliff to becoming overrun. One of the people he never convinced was the sheriff, but he still got his numbers. Unfortunately, he would receive harassing phone calls every night and would frequently have cars parked outside his house at odd hours. Everyone knows everyone. Population 1,000, remember? And these were not locals. It came to a head when his house got broken into and letters were left threatening my aunt and cousins, who were young children at the time. Stadies got involved, and the behavior immediately stopped. A few days later, the cultists packed up and left. Officially, the threats and break-in were never solved, though every once in a while they would still get odd phone calls and blank letters in the mail. Yay, anthrax scare. Unofficially, everyone knows. A few years later, my uncle and family moved out into the country, and all the harassment stopped. 2 bodies were found on my island in Southeast Asia in the last 24 hours. One was found in the jungle after being there for a year in an apparent motorbike accident, the other washed up on the beach. Probably too late to be seen, but my small town used to host a large bike race, literally hundreds of cyclists riding around the park's 3/4-mile loop track, maybe some road racing as well, can't remember. Anyway, the large gathering required all the police force to be on hand, and with the jam of cars, bicycles, and people, it was really hard to get in or out. A bank robber dressed in full cyclist gear came into a bank just a block away from the park, robbed them blind, and then hopped on his getaway bicycle and rode into the crowd at the park. By the time the police could respond, he was in the mix of people, and to this day, no one has ever been charged. Perfect crime. When I was a teenager, there was a spate of rude graffiti in my quiet, boring town of under 30,000 people. It was all obviously being done by the same person, as all the penises were drawn in a very unique style, and they were all signed Frisbee, with the Z's written in a distinctive way. There didn't seem to be any pattern of where they would strike either. Every week or so, a new one would appear, on a wall outside the social club, in the highway underpass, inside the fish and chip shop toilet, etc. It got to a point where kids at school would keep track of where the latest Frisbee had appeared, and it would be all anyone could talk about. In a way, they were the proto-Banksy. Everyone wanted to know their true identity, including the police. Since our town had practically no crime other than the odd stolen bicycle, the cops had the time and resources to come down hard on this one. It was, and still is, a solidly conservative town, so no doubt they were under pressure too from the local council to quickly address this shocking moral depravity and prevent the appearance of further enormous, stylized, ejaculating cocks around town. They went around the schools, including the elementary primaries, and interviewed bunches of kids looking for any clues that might lead them to the mysterious Frisbee. Supposedly, they checked the school registration books and paid particular attention to any kid who had a name that might reasonably lead to a nickname Frisbee. And we all swore that we saw more police cars driving around than usual that summer, looking to catch the mystery artist in the act. As far as I know, they never did get him or her. The graffiti just stopped appearing as suddenly as it started. Nor did we kids ever find out who it was. There were tons of theories, of course, with a lot of suspicious falling on kid called Charlie in the year above me because apparently he liked to doodle dicks and balls on his notebook. However, he was subsequently cleared by some girl called Debbie who sat next to him in French, and she sneaked a peek at his doodles one day, and she reported that the vein structure running down Charlie's shaft was intrinsically different from that of Frisbee's, and therefore not a match. TL, DR. Someone went around town drawing massive schlongs. Police spared no expense trying to catch the perpetrator, but never did. Not exactly a small town, but small compared to the region. There was a house that burned down 3 times in the span of a decade. I remember hearing lots of rumors about divorces and revenge, gang activity, and being cursed, not sure if it was ever solved. In 2003 in my hometown, someone decided to burn down a playground. This was in a very small rural town. The nearest playground aside from that one was 15 miles away. This playground was decent-sized too, and I believe it was made possible by a donation from someone in town. It was mostly wood with rubberized mesh, steel bars, and large plastic slides. Nobody ever figured out who did it. A girl in my town went missing, and the cops just did nothing and refused to make an arrest despite the evidence. She had a shaky and very abusive relationship with her boyfriend. One night after they broke up again, he and his friends stopped by her and her parents' house, saying he wanted to talk to her in his car. She agreed, and the three of them left. She hadn't been seen since, but her ex and his friend had been seen in town acting like nothing happened. The parents reported her missing and stated that their daughter's ex and his friend were last seen with her. The police didn't make an arrest and didn't investigate. It's been many years. I can't tell how long. I estimate about 4 years or more. Rumors spread like they always do. Rumors of her being sold as a sex slave. Rumors of her being murdered and either being buried somewhere or fed to pigs. No one knows what really happened, except the ex and his friend. This year, the friend was found dead with a gunshot to the head. The bullet went straight through. If I remember correctly, it was ruled as a murder, but the rumor of suicide has been going around. Some say that the ex shot the friend because the friend was going to snitch due to guilt. I think the ex is arrested now for the murder of his friend, but I could be wrong. There's a $2,000 reward for anyone who finds the missing girl. Family just wants closure. I remember seeing the father's truck covered in his daughter's picture, trying to get the word out there. Cindy Tig Rivera, if you are reading this, your parents haven't given up. I still see your signs plastered all over town. They miss you so much. It's not really unsolved, but definitely a weird one. There was a row of terraced houses next to the church. The one closest was occupied by two women, a mother and daughter, both who had some mental incapacities. They basically only left the house to walk to the supermarket. As the mother got older, only the daughter went out. Eventually, no one was leaving the house. The garden, which was already overgrown, got out of control. The poor structural condition at the back of the house worsened. This part was connected to the neighboring house, and after receiving no response, eventually the neighbors contacted the Environment Agency out of fear for their own house. The Environment Agency came round, received no response at the door, and so called the police to assist with access. Inside, letters were piled up behind the door. A desk fan was oscillating. The daughter was found on the floor, dead. Had been for quite some time. Investigators come in and start searching the house. Bills were on direct debits and had all been paid automatically. The inhabitants had been hoarders. The house took a very long time to sort through. Eventually, they realized they were missing someone. Where was the mother? They had to keep searching through the house, searching for any evidence of the mother. Where she's gone. In the bathroom, there was a huge pile of things on top of the bath. Mattresses, blankets, towels. Underneath all this, they found the mother's body, wrapped in a blanket, practically mummified, such that it was impossible to ascertain how long she'd been dead for. It just disturbs me. I walk past that house every day. I thought it was abandoned. What are some places on Earth that remain unexplored because they are too dangerous or difficult to enter? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It's all about the deep ocean. We've only recently developed the tech to enter deep-sea territories, and there are more of those area-wise than all the land on Earth. Think about that. Think about all the obscure terrestrial species just discovered this century, and then think about the fact that they were 100 times easier to discover than most of the stuff on the sea floor. The tomb of Emperor Qin, the one with the famous terracotta warrior army. The mausoleum has been partially excavated, which is why we know all those soldier statues exist, but the emperor's actual resting place remains untouched. It'd be an archaeological treasure trove, being a literal underground palace. The issues of grave robbing and damage to the artifacts aside, it's likely laced with toxic mercury. Gangkar Punsum, Bhutan. Tallest unclimbed mountain in the world. 4 expeditions have been made to get up, but have failed due to weather and safety conditions. We don't know what could be up there. Rocks? Most of Papua New Guinea is unexplored. It's considered the least explored country. There's over 40 uncontacted tribes living in the jungles and over 800 native languages. The prison island of Makronissos in Greece. The Greek government really does not want people to know what exactly happened there. North Tanzania's Lake Natron looks and acts a lot like a lake of fire. The lake's high levels of natron, sodium carbonate decahydrate, makes its water corrosive to human skin and eyes, sometimes reaching a pH level of over 12. The lake also contains red-colored bacteria, resulting in its unique pink-red hues. Even if most species cannot handle the 120-degree lake, cyanobacteria have made natron their home and turned the lake its trademark reds and oranges. Surprisingly, 2.5 million lesser flamingos call Lake Natron their home. Danakil Desert in East Africa have temperatures that regularly exceed 50 degrees Celsius, 122 degrees Fahrenheit, volcanoes and geysers that spew toxic gas. Your physical health can take a massive hit even after a short time. The most adverse effects occur due to the presence of high concentration of poisoning vapors of sulfur in the region. This region is a volcanically active area, and the air temperature in the desert rarely falls below 50 degrees Celsius. Enjoy your stay. Not truly unexplored, but government protected, Plum Island in Connecticut. Apparently, they have been using that for research and testing. Always heard of it growing up and can go near it on boat, but always warned to never try to get onto the island. Allihies Mines in Barra, Ireland. Lots of mining disasters, ground very unstable. Many of the miners who survived went to Butte, Montana, and Deadwood, South Dakota. My family went to Butte and Deadwood, saved their money, and came home to Barra to buy our family farm. They bought it in the late 1800s when the native Irish were allowed to buy land. Most of the Allihies mine are still closed off. They are reputed to be haunted, and honestly, I believe it. It's an eerie place. Mount Kailash. It's sort of forbidden, but there have been attempts and people have reported strange phenomena at the base of the mountain and have found it very difficult to climb. F4 Objectum in Hungary. It's an old, now abandoned bunker of the president that's hard to enter. The interesting thing about it is that F4 means Főmunkahelyi number 4, or main workplace number 4, which indicates that there are still 3 out there under Budapest, but nobody knows where. The basement of Chernobyl. It is highly radioactive due to the elephant's foot. The elephant's foot is a massive corium. The corium is compiled of melted concrete, steel beams, nuclear fuel rods, and anything else that melted into it as it melted through the floor. It is so deadly that even now, being around it for 300 seconds will cause you to die relatively quickly. Being around it for 30 seconds will cause dizziness, fatigue, and nausea. The mass was caused by the explosion of the power plant, which heated the materials to form corium. Chernobyl had to be evacuated and is now rarely visited due to high levels of radiation. The Governor Mine near Acton, California, was active from the 1800s till 1942. There were rich streaks where the gold was said to look like grains of rice in the host rock that yielded hundreds of dollars per ton. The main shaft went down to over 1,000 feet, with levels branching off every 100 feet or so. By the 80s, the long inactive site was in disrepair, and at some point an explorer fell down the shaft into an area so unsafe, old unstable dynamite, poison gases, failing timbers, and collapses that his body was never recovered, and the mine was permanently sealed. There used to be thousands of old mine shafts and adits all over the mountains and desert. In the last 25 years, the BLM and other agencies have been systematically sealing them off. An old silver mine in the Calico area had a solid rock hanging wall that the ore collected beneath, so when it was excavated, they placed large tree trunks as timbers. Over the decades, the weight caused some of these to blow out into a bundle of splinters somewhere along the length. There were 3 rickety ladders leading to a lower level with rails and rockfall on the floor and a stoop-low ceiling. I explored this one several times before it was sealed off forever. I have a friend who died base jumping at Baffin Island in the Arctic Circle over 10 years ago. His body is still there because it was too difficult to recover. I presume the area around him is pretty unexplored. Mostly the whole Antarctic continent. It is huge, containing sprawling valleys and plains, gigantic mountain ranges, and some of the highest elevation and wildest plateaus on Earth. Only some parts of it have been properly explored. Most of it is covered by thick ice during winter. It's dark and sunless for months. Without the proper equipment, humans would last just a few minutes before dying of hypothermia. It holds countless billion-year-old archaeological secrets and innumerable mineral riches buried beneath the ice. It is truly a treasure trove. Kamchatka, Russia. Closed to the public for a long time. Area the size of California and has over 300 volcanoes, one that's been erupting since 1996. Singi de Bemaraha National Park, Madagascar. High amount of unique to the region biodiversity. Much of the area is closed to tourists. Very unique limestone formations. Mount Namuli, Mozambique. It's a mountain, but has a forest growing on top, which is only accessible by climbing. Some scientists did some exploration there recently. Very cool story. Cape Melville, Australia. Only accessible by helicopter. Extremely isolated and difficult to access. As such, it's not really been explored much except by some scientists. 3 new animals discovered there in 2013. Surtsey Island. Located off the coast of Iceland. Formed between 1963 and 1967 from volcanic eruptions, only a handful of scientists have been there. Totally free from human interference, being kept that way to see how life develops naturally on a newly formed island. A little late to the party, but I wanted to contribute. Snake Island in Brazil. It's named Snake Island because it is literally infested with thousands and thousands of deadly snakes. There are thought to be about 4,000 golden lanceheads on the island, one of the most venomous snakes on the planet. It has been officially made illegal to travel to the island by the Brazilian government because of how dangerous it is. North Yungas Road is known as the Death Road for all the right reasons that you can guess. Driving up or down this 43-mile, 69-kilometer switchback is extremely dangerous because of fog, landslides, waterfalls, and cliffs falling 2,000 feet, 610 meters in each turn. Until 1994, almost 300 drivers were killed every year. You have to check out the Sentinelese Island. This island is still unexplored by anyone because of the tribes living there that constantly reject all contacts with outsiders. They actually kill anyone who dares to go to the island. The Earth's inner layers, 400 miles deep inside the Earth, is supposed to be 3 times the amount of water on the surface. The water is past boiling point, but is under so much pressure it remains a liquid. The Earth's core is supposed to be solid iron and near 0 gravity. Cool. Skeleton Island in Ireland. Eerie place, apparently. Story goes that it was a witches' warlock place of worship. They would take young kids there to sacrifice them. This was hundreds of years ago. No one goes there now or has done for as long as there are records. It is an island in a lake in the middle of the country. Lots of different stories or myths around the island, but it has never been explored. I know of it because my father's father was a 7th son, a big deal in Ireland, so he would have been allowed to go to the island by the elders if he so wished. He did not. Ted Bundy Caves in Utah. You aren't supposed to go in there because of how dangerous it can be, and it's all blocked off with bars and people still go inside. These caves are where Ted Bundy would sometimes dump his victims. Mount Canocti in Northern California. It is thought that the inside of it is a hollow magma chamber. Natives claim that they explored into the mountain and found eyeless fish and strange other things inside. It is believed that it could be the largest cavern in the world. It was closed off because it was privately owned, and those tunnels are prone to collapse because there are so many earthquakes here. Bhangur Fort in Rajasthan, India. It's a historical monument and is one of the scariest places in India. It is believed to have witnessed a number of paranormal activities, and people, volunteers, who stayed in to prove that the rumors were untrue, never returned. Bhangra, Rajasthan. Skeleton Coast is a pretty bad one. It has harsh weather, little to no food supply, and is scattered with animal remains. It also has large amounts of violence from the local gangs on the island, like robberies and such. Supply Depot in Long Binh in Vietnam. It has been left intact ever since the withdrawal of the U.S. Army. The door were tightly sealed, and Vietnam is afraid of busting it open for fearing of traps. Some doors even self-destructed when Vietnam tried to open it, and Soviets experts failed to open them as well. US so far has been refusing to help Vietnam open it. It will probably stay like that for the foreseeable future. Serious. Have you ever known someone who's gone missing? If so, what's the story? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. A woman who was friends with my grandmother. She disappeared for 4 years until her husband died in an accident. The man was extremely violent, and it was a time when abuse was not taken seriously. Marital rape wasn't even a thing in the law. So, not seeing any solution, the woman left, and only came back when the news that her husband died reached her. My neighbor's wife disappeared one day. Then they found out the husband cooked her in their restaurant for 3 days. He drained the liquids into the grease trap and threw the bones into the garbage. Never found those. But he kept her skull for his mom's attic. He got a new girlfriend within weeks of his wife's disappearance, and when he noticed the cops following him on a drive with his girlfriend, he confessed everything to her, stopped the car, and jumped off a huge cliff and lived. When they asked him why he killed her, he just said she was too loud. Had a friend in high school who had seriously strict parents. He really wasn't a bad kid at all, just doing the normal stuff we all were doing, but his parents decided he needed to go to some kind of military boarding school. We wrote to each other, but it kinda trickled off as a couple of years went by. He came back to our town and we hung out a little, but then he was gone, and no one ever heard of him again, including his family. I still think of him to this day. This was the mid to late 70s. A girl that transferred into our high school around 10th grade just up and disappeared one weekend without any real trace. Many weeks later, it turned out she had left town to meet a guy she met on AOL. See kids, AOL used to. Classic story. He was much older. She was underage. They actually stayed together and the girl's family ended up coming around to accepting it. Really weird. What made it even weirder for me is that I was not friends with this girl, but she lived in my neighborhood. Years later, my mom had become friends with the girl's mom, and my mom found out that the girl told her parents for months that she was on the phone or IMing me anytime she was talking to the older man. Her parents eventually realized she and I were never communicating, but since we were the same age, I was unknowingly her cover story for months. To this day, I've still never had an actual conversation with this girl. Really weird finding out that I had been her fake boyfriend all those years prior. I went to the same elementary school as Michael Dennehy. He was kidnapped off the playground and is still not found to this day. I remember after it happened, every parent showed up to walk the entire school of kids home. I also remember running ahead of the pack for whatever reason, and all the parents were screaming at me to get back. They were terrified. When I was a teenager, there was a kid that lived a few doors down from me that was always hanging around my driveway. He didn't have very many friends, came from a broken home, and had some behavioral issues, clearly in need of companionship. I would invite him on bike rides around our neighborhood and play video games with him. He always used to tell me that if he ever chose to disappear, no one would be able to find him. Years later, when he was around 25, he made good on that promise. His mother is one of the kindest people I have ever met, and it's been about 7 years, and she is still fervently looking for him. It is crushing. Had a coworker employee in high school who went missing for 3 days. Turned out he'd gone out for a walk without telling anyone. A tree had fallen on him and he'd been unable to free himself. He was dehydrated and obviously shaken when they found him, but he recovered and came back to work a few days later. America. My cousin never came home from school one afternoon. She was only 12 at the time, so it was unusual. Her body was later found in the woods. A family friend saw her walking home from school, told her he'd give her a ride home. He instead took her to the woods to rape and murder her. The sick bastard helped looking for her as well. Yeah. This one might get a little disturbing. I was the person who went missing when I was about 6 years old for about 2 weeks. I don't remember much of it, but I know it definitely happened as I have scars and stuff from it, but I can't remember what exactly happened. I was taken by my cousin and held for 2 weeks before they found me. Those entire 2 weeks were one big blur. According to my parents, they said I had many slash wounds, cuts, bruises, and burns, and the police had found evidence of me also being sexually assaulted. I remember being told it happened, but not really remembering any details after that, and in my teens, but I also had a lot of problems with new people and started being scared of adults and anyone new. Until more recently, but even now, it's like all in bits and pieces with no real clear chronological order. Here are some of the pieces I have put together that I feel at least somewhat comfortable sharing. I remember sitting in a bathtub while bleeding and having someone, not my cousin, yell at me and touch my testicles. I also remember being attacked and bitten by a dog while my cousin and this other abuser, the same person from before, watched. I also remember being hit with a belt until I bled and having had my feet pressed against hot coal. It's only things like that I remember, and they are not in order, and I've recently tried to call the police to investigate the other abuser I had mentioned and possibly take them into custody. Now I'm a 23-year-old who just got out of college, but I still regularly go to the therapist for regular nightmares and still find myself getting nervous and sweating when I deal with middle-aged men. Half-brother. He went missing after going out on the lake with a friend's boat and his girlfriend. It had started raining and storming and the boat tipped over. His girlfriend made it back to shore. He didn't. They took 2 days to find him. They dragged the lake for his body. He was eventually found dead, washed up on the shore somewhere along the tree line of the lake. A fella I went to middle and high school with went missing around Thanksgiving one year. It was about 10 years ago now, mid-sized town in Kentucky. There were a lot of Facebook posts, pleas from his dad, community-organized searches, etc. He was a new father himself, and it made for a terribly sad story around the holidays. If I remember right, his truck was found burned out, hidden in the woods. Then his body was found separately, also burned but with a gunshot wound to the head. I don't believe anyone has been charged, or at least I haven't heard of such. About 15 years ago, my uncle drove up from Arizona with his 3 kids to Illinois, where my family and grandma live. He stayed the weekend at my grandma's and was supposed to stay another week before heading back to Arizona, but then left in the middle of the night on a Sunday without a word. He did, however, leave a note saying he wouldn't be back and my grandma was to take care of the kids. None of us, not even his kids or ex-wife, heard or saw anything about him until 2 years ago, when my mom found him on Facebook. Apparently, he moved to the Philippines with some Filipino woman and started a new family there. Nice. My grandfather. He was a deadbeat dad, drinking all his money and making my mother and grandma suffer a lot. He was violent and used to cheat on my grandma with several women. One day he didn't come home after work to the house for about 15 years. Turns out he had won a lottery prize during the 70s and moved to Brazil without telling anybody. My grandma only got a letter a year later saying that she should meet him in Brazil, but my grandma ignored him and married the man she spent her whole life with. Funny enough, he came back during the 90s completely broke and with a debt with some Brazilian mafia dudes. My mom told him to beat it, and he threatened us to sell the house unless we welcomed him back to the family. Little did he know that my grandma actually bought back the house from the bank, so he spent the rest of his short remaining life as a homeless man. A couple years after my grandpa died from cancer, my grandma started dating a guy named Buck, and his daughter had gone missing when she was 14. Buck's sister, her friend, and his daughter went horseback camping in a rugged area in Utah. When Buck went to his sister's house a week later to pick up his daughter Julia, his sister calmly explained that Julia wasn't there. As halfway through their trip, they woke up one morning and Julia wasn't in her tent. Buck's sister and her friend said they looked for Julia but never found her, and returned home with the horses. Buck called the police, and the investigation uncovered a lesbian relationship between his sister and the friend, but after an extensive search, they didn't find anything. His sister refused to speak to him ever again. Buck spent the next 10 years looking for Julia, hired the best horsemen to cover the terrain, hired PIs, bloodhounds, experts in the area who knew the terrain and plains. As technology advanced, he would try anything new to find evidence, but nothing ever turned up. He lost a ton of money to the searches and his marriage, as it destroyed him and he couldn't move past it. He spent weeks alone on horseback and foot, looking, searching, and talking to her. He theorized to me that he believes his sister and her lover went after Julia to rape her, and when she fought back, they killed her and dumped her body in one of the many deep ravines that are unsearchable and unreachable. Even decades later, he seemed obsessed and said that he couldn't wait to die to find out what happened and to get to hold Julia again in heaven. I had an employee, Jason, that had worked for us 6 years ago, 4 of those directly reporting to me. He was a pretty good worker and a nice guy. One day, a police officer came to our office and said he was looking for Jason. Jason was scheduled off. The officer said, Jason has a warrant for an unpaid traffic violation, no big deal. He just wanted to come down to the court building and make arrangements to take care of the legal issue. The next day, we told Jason what had happened. He asked me if he could clock out right then and go down and settle it immediately. I said sure. So he went. Later that same day, he came back to work, saying it was all taken care of. Maybe a month went by, and then another officer showed up looking for Jason. The next time Jason was scheduled, I told him another cop came by. He said he had worked out a payment plan for the fine and had forgotten to make the payment. He again asked me if he could leave to take care of it. He left. I never saw him again. Ever. We called the jails in the area to see if they had him. No. We eventually got in touch with his ex. She said that she was looking for him too and hadn't seen him. To this day, I don't really know what happened or where he went. Online searches have not turned up anything. He has a pretty common name, so it's like a needle in a haystack. It seemed like a simple traffic fine was hardly a reason to abandon a good job, but we may never know. Worked at a company where I got real close to the 2 owners. A very odd relationship, but it worked. They had a third business partner who left due to mental illness. He'd pop in every so often and cash a check, despite selling his shares, ownership, etc. They still gave him a fairly decent wage for doing nothing. Chill guy. Name was Simon. Long story short, we all went to Amsterdam for a few days to let off steam after a grueling quarter. Had a hangover-esque night out, woke up to no Simon. Searched high and low, informed the local police after 24 hours, and booked a few extra nights in hopes he'd turn up again. Never did. Booked another 2 nights, still no luck. Left for home and informed his significant other and family and opened inquiries with the police back in the UK. 3 weeks after returning, Simon's wife received a voicemail from a private number, muffled along the lines of, "In trouble, can't come home, they're on to me." This led to some extreme days of questioning at a local drunk tank, but nothing heard from after a further 6 weeks. Case closed. No new evidence, etc., etc. Tried to appeal and got shut down. Dude just left. Clearly didn't die, pre-creepy voicemail, but hasn't been heard of since. 2 kids as well. Such a shame. Really booked me out for a while. I can't get very detailed, but my friend's teenage son went missing. The son was a sports star, great kid, had scholarships to his college of choice, was in the top 10% of the student body, etc. He was gone for a week, and the whole community really rallied to look for him. Unfortunately, it came to light that 2 of his friends were actually sick shits. He had become a star student when they went to high school, but his 2 friends from elementary school didn't. They had gotten increasingly more jealous of his loving parents, stable finances, scholarships, grades, and praise, until they decided to kill him. They had planned their friend's murder, carried it out, hidden his body, then helped look for him, all while knowing he was dead. Their Facebook messages to one another revealed the truth after about a week, and it wasn't long until his body was found. Long-haul truckers, what's the creepiest, most paranormal thing you've seen on the road at night? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I was 23. My newly married husband and I decided driving team would be a fun adventure after college, rather than jumping into the 9 to 5. I was down in Arizona on a long stretch of nothing about 4 a.m. when a guy pulled up next to me, waving his CB. I never left mine on. Listening to those guys' BS was irritating. I turned on my CB, and he told me I had a blown tire. I thanked him, figuring I would stop at the next truck stop. He kept harassing me to pull over and check my tire for a good 40 miles. I finally got to a next town and pilot truck stop, got out and checked my truck. No blown tires anywhere. No clue what that guy would have done to me, but so glad I trusted my gut and didn't stop. Not paranormal, but I have plenty of stories as a young woman on the road. Not exactly at a road, but in the sky. I'm a pilot and usually fly around Florida. This specific night, I was out at around 11:30 p.m. with a friend flying down the eastern shoreline when I suddenly see a medium-sized white light slowly start coming towards us, stop, and then go vertically into the ocean and disappear. Both my friend and I saw it, and we were completely speechless. Asked the air traffic control if there were any kind of aircraft around us, and he told us we were the only aircraft in a 40-mile radius. Saw a clown staggering down an alley in the city, back facing us, while we were coming to a stoplight at like 1 a.m. Looked like he was still blowing balloons or masturbating. Not seeing his face made it more ominous. I'm not sure if it's either really creepy or sad. Maybe he was on his way to abduct children, or maybe he was blind drunk after a long day. Wow, balloons is a lucky guy. Not a trucker, but I've driven cross-country a few times. Have two freaky things that have happened. First, middle of the night with a buddy, and we pulled off to the side of the highway to take a piss and switch drivers. Nobody else around on the road. I walk to the side, pitch black, whip it out, and start to pee. My buddy is just stretching his back or whatever. I heard something in the woods shake a tree. No other way to describe it. A tree about 30 feet away shook. Then I hear something big crashing through the woods, coming straight for us and the car. My buddy and I don't even say anything. He dives in the driver's side, and I jump through the passenger window, pants still down. He floors it out of there, legs and pants dangling outside. Never did see anything in the rearview mirror, but there was something out there coming at us. My buddy likes to say he heard me stop peeing when that tree shook. Second, I was solo somewhere in West Virginia again, middle of the night. I got off an exit, one of those long, curvy ones. I saw lights before I got off and assumed it was exit stuff or maybe even construction. Get to the exit and it's not construction. It's a ton of Army or National Guard guys. The exit was lit up brighter than daytime. So many lights set up pointing everywhere. The Army guys were completely decked out, gas masks on and assault rifles. They were sprinting around. One guy at the corner was frantically waving me through to get back on the highway. I gunned it out of there. Looked in the news later and didn't see anything. No idea what was going on that night. Not a long-haul trucker, but thought this would fit here. Also on mobile, so sorry for format. My mom, sister, and I were on our way to a baseball game of mine during my junior year of high school. This was in northern New York, so spring got a little chilly at times. The main road we took stretched about 35 miles and was nothing but cornfields and tree lines. We hit a stretch of the road that was super foggy for no reason, so my mom slowed down to a proper speed. We finally reached the end of the fog, and we all looked to the left to see where we were. About 50 yards from the road was a man and woman in what appeared to be wedding clothes from at least 100 years ago. Man wearing a big top hat, and the woman wearing a very old-looking white dress, holding hands with their backs to us, walking towards the wood line. We drove past, and I just remember the silence in the car until my mom said, "What the fuck was that?" Till this day, whenever we're together and one of us tells the story, we all get goosebumps. Not a trucker, but I was driving through Nevada on a long trip. About 3 a.m., sun barely starting to peek out. My sister was asleep in the passenger seat and my parents asleep in the back seat, so it was just me on a straight stretch of highway in the middle of the desert. I was exhausted and extremely bored from the lack of scenery when suddenly, directly in front of me, up in the pale sky, there was a flash of green, and a green meteor carved toward the horizon before flashing green again and disappeared. At first I thought it was a UFO or something, but I later read meteors can burn green if they have copper in them. Now I think fondly back on that meteor. My family was asleep for it, no one around for miles. I like to think that it was just for me. A friend of my cousin was a long-haul trucker. He was making a delivery across the country and was in a hardly used dirt stretch of a rural route. Since the road wasn't exactly peachy, he had to drive slowly. He sees another truck slowly approaching from the opposite direction, and he sees the truck is the same as his. Since this isn't fairly uncommon, he didn't think much of it, but as the other one grew closer, He decided to honk in recognition of having the same kind of truck. The other one replies, and all is good. That is, until they narrowly and very slowly had to pass one another. He turned to look at the driver, and he saw himself. Not a reflection, not a similar person, but his exact same copy. Same clothes, same hat, same red beard, staring at him. They passed each other, and that was that. He told me he'd seen very weird things, but that was the moment he decided to stop being a trucker. This is my father's story, and he wasn't a long-haul trucker, but rather an 18-year-old gas station attendant in the late 70s, and without a certain long-haul trucker, I probably wouldn't be here. The gas station was 24 hours, and my dad was the only one working the night shift, 11 to 7, I think. A guy comes in and just gives him the creeps. Seems sketchy. He was wearing tight jacket, pants, and you could tell he had something in his pants under the jacket. It was during the summer and was warm, so why is he wearing a jacket to begin with? It was later confirmed he was on drugs. A lot of truck drivers used this station as it was the only one open 24 hours for a long stretch of the highway. They also had a big lot where they let truckers park and sleep or take a break. On this night, at this time, it was just my dad, sketchy dude, and one trucker in there. He kinda knew, as in came in frequent enough to be conversational, and asked if he stay in the station and hang out until sketchy dude left. Well, after looking at the stocked shelves for several minutes while sneaking peeks at my dad behind the counter, the sketchy guy eventually looked fed up and got into his blue car and sped off. Cool trucker guy hung out with my dad a little longer until another couple of guys came in to use the booths. They had to eat a sandwich. I should also point out, this was pretty middle of nowhere, rural southeast United States, and the 1970s. CB and landline was it. My dad only had a landline in the store. Dad did not have any protection or weapon of any kind. So, the hours pass, and my dad has shaken off the paranoia when all of a sudden, this guy in a car comes hauling ass into the lot, jumps out, and sprints into the store hollering he needs a phone. He didn't have a CB, nor did he see a phone at the other station. He also wasn't familiar with the area, and my dad's station was the first place he found. Calls 911 to report he had walked in on a gas station 40 miles back, next closest station, to find the attendant shot and dead. No one else around, and the only other piece of information is that a blue car was speeding out of the lot when the trucker pulled in. Apparently, they eventually apprehend the guy in the blue car. My dad confirms it was sketchy dude from earlier in the night, and they charge him with murder and armed robbery. To the long-haul trucker who waited around with my dad that night, thanks, and hope you're keeping it real. Also worth adding that apparently sketchy guy in blue car was already a bad apple who was either being looked for on probation or something. He was in the system. Edit. I'm editing this a couple months later, but I recently talked with my dad and he cleared a couple things up, so anything in bold above is edited. It's not much, but there it is. I'm not a long-haul trucker, but I was on a kind of long road trip one night. It was about 1 to 2 a.m. Saw a huge flash out towards the right rear passenger side, almost like stadium lights turned on then off real quick, so bright and white it was crazy. Thing is, I was on a major interstate, in the middle of a forest, no cars around me. My first thought was an angel or something. To this day, I'm still stumped. This actually happened the other day in a random country road in Tennessee. Pitch black darkness, and the only thing around was fields, hills, and me. Didn't see any houses. Anyway, I was getting real tired since the day before this I just flew from Washington to Atlanta. I was driving from Atlanta to northern Indiana, and out of nowhere, I see a dog in the grass, and normally this is fine, but its eyes weren't glowing from my headlights, which for some reason really made me feel unsettled. Next thing I know, it charged for the tire of my trailer, snarling and barking. Thank God I didn't hit it, and I looked back and it was gone. As bad as it sounds, even if I did hit it, I probably wouldn't have stopped because I was in the middle of nowhere with no cell service. I've heard stories of people finding some way to get people to stop in their commute in the middle of nowhere just to rob and or kill or hurt the driver. It was midnight, and I wasn't taking the chance. My stepdad is a truck driver, and I asked him this question, and he gave me 3 answers. In Winston-Salem, North Carolina, a guy was masturbating while driving by his truck, and my stepdad threw his water bottle at him. Another time, he said he was up near Oregon, and he was the only one on the freeway at the time since it was around 2 a.m., and something large and pale swooped down a few yards in front of his truck and swooped back up into the tree line. While driving at 70 miles per hour, a tire rolled ahead of him and went across the median, nearly hitting another car. I'm not a long-haul trucker, but I drove a moving truck across Nebraska. There's a point where you're going freeway speed, but the scenery doesn't change. It's a very strange sensation, and it seemed to last far too long. I started to freak out at one point because I had the thought that I've always been driving through Nebraska and I always will be. Everything else that has happened in my life must have been a hallucination, as there's nothing but Nebraska in the horizon. Nebraska is the truth. Nebraska is life. I was driving in upstate New York in early spring during deer season, and not only were there deer everywhere you had to look out for, there was deer pieces strewn everywhere from cars hitting them, then more cars hitting the roadkill, and so on. Literal deer chunks all over the road. Gross. Not a long-haul trucker, but I grew up on a farm. We grew peas and would run the combines 24/7. I ran a tri-axle dump truck back and forth from the various fields to the canning factory. I always preferred the night shift. Temps way cooler, less traffic, etc. One night, we had some thunderstorms roll through. I was driving down a back road at like 2 a.m. All of a sudden, a patio chair crosses the road at just about the max range of my headlights, followed by another, and then a large patio table went cartwheeling by. I immediately stopped hard. Shit got real. Truck started to move quite a bit, and I'll be honest, I screamed like a little kid. I'm certain I would have rolled had I not been loaded down with 20 plus tons of peas. Confirmed tornado the next morning. By how I wish I'd had a dash cam back then, so not exactly creepy or paranormal, but scared the shit out of me for sure. Was driving on this back road at maybe 2 to 3 a.m. after hanging out with friends. Nobody on the roads, certainly nobody walking. It was incredibly foggy. The area here is a small protected wetland, and visibility was maybe 30 to 40 feet at best. There's a 90-degree turn. As I'm turning, there's a man standing there, arms at his sides, wearing ragged clothes, just standing perfectly still about 2 feet into the road. I nearly hit him, but was certainly closer to shitting my pants than anything else. Edit. I should mention I am not a long-haul trucker. I was in a car, my high school beater. I am a long-haul trucker. One thing that most people don't know about truck drivers is that we are in a constant state of diarrhea. One day, luckily during summer, I was driving through Buffalo and got the sudden urge to shit. As if I were hit by lightning, brown lightning to be specific. I didn't have anywhere to stop in town, so I held it until I could get 35 miles south of there to the nearest truck stop. When I got there, I realized my GPS was a bit out of date. This place was abandoned. I checked the door anyway, had to shit badly. I was in panic mode at this point. The door was firmly locked, so I scanned the back lot. The only things back there were a broken down school bus in high grass and a beaver statue on a 4-foot tall plinth. Being from Florida, I have ingrained concerns about shitting in high grass because that's how you get snake bit. So I walk over to this beaver statue and drop trow, leaning my back against the plinth for balance. I was in overalls at the time, so this was a very compromising position, trying to not shit on the back flap. I'm leaning there, making abstract chocolate wall art, when I hear a rustling in the bushes and look over to see a beaver slowly walking backwards into the bushes as if he had seen the ultimate desecration of his god. I then realized the statue itself was made out of wood. This had me concerned that maybe that beaver had made the statue. Was the place abandoned because the beavers had taken over? Was this a war memorial made for the beaver soldiers who died? After all the speculation, I finished my shameful act. That's where things took a turn. In my haste to evacuate my brown hotel, I realized I had left my paper towel or baby wipes in the truck. So now I have a decision. Do I waddle the 200 yards to my truck to fish it out? Can't wipe with my socks without sitting on a shit ass. So I had to tear the sleeves off my shirt and use them to wipe. Serves me right for my beaver blasphemy. Got back in the truck and rode out. And that's why truckers wear sleeveless shirts.
Warning, may contain disturbing content. Viewer discretion advised.
Serious. What's the most traumatizing thing you experienced as a child? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I was about 7 or 8 when I heard some noise coming from the garage. My mom was at work and I was being babysat by one of my uncles. I went to open the garage to find my other uncle strangling his girlfriend up against the car. She had blood coming out of her nose and mouth. I just froze and stood there staring, and my uncle didn't even notice and continued choking and strangling her. My other uncle came to the door where I was standing, saw what was happening, and grabbed me. He called my mom and then the police, who later came and arrested my uncle. There's more to this story I wasn't privy to at such a young age, but yeah, my other uncle is crazy. He's been to jail a few times, has anger and control issues. Watching my grandpa slowly waste away on our living room couch. He had a paraganglioma on his pancreas, and there was nothing, especially in 1980, that could be done for him. I was 4, and he was my favorite person, and I couldn't sit with him or hug him or anything. I miss him even after 40 years. Either that or my best friend dying over Christmas break in 1988. I miss her too. I pretty much hated everything after that. I saw my dad get swept away and drown when I was 11. It's really something I've never recovered from. It's been 16 years, and not a day goes by I don't remember it. I was in a nearby town with my parents. We were on this walking bridge when a guy got on the railing and jumped. Can still clearly see his mangled body on the dried riverbed below. The older I got through my teens, the more my stepfather's alcoholism spiraled out of control, and the more I was biding my time until I was 18 and would head off to college. Education was my only escape in my mind. Every instance of physical and emotional abuse had to be met with, "Just shut up and take it. It'll be over someday." Really wish I could give that kid who slept on the floor of a 3-bedroom trailer a hug and say that he'd make it out and get a master's degree. I feel like I just won a decade-long war. I was stalked by a mentally handicapped man that lived in our neighborhood when I was 10 years old. He was a fully grown man, probably in his 30s or something, but he had the mental capacity of a young child. He didn't drive a car or anything and didn't have a job, and he lived in the neighborhood with his parents. Our neighborhood had a very large park in it. There were a few different playground areas and picnic areas, and then a half a dozen baseball diamonds where the city's Little League played all its games. He was a staple in the area in the summers, where he was usually in the park watching baseball games or watching people play basketball. He was very friendly, and the Little League kids knew his name and would say hello when they saw him. I'm sure there were some kids who teased him, but the general tone was people were nice. At least that's how I remember it. And for a few years, I just knew him that way. But for some reason, he seemed to fixate on me. But I was at the park playground with my brother, and he approached us and we talked to him. He tried hugging me, and then he put his hand on my crotch and pinched my butt. My brother, who was a few years older than me, pulled me away and told him to stop doing that and leave us alone. We took off for home, and he chased us but didn't catch us before we got home. We went into our house and locked the doors, but he stood outside yelling my name to come out and see him. A neighbor came over and made him leave and made sure we were all right. Things sort of escalated after that, in that my brother and I saw him all the time, and we found him waiting up the street from our house, waiting for us to come outside after our parents left for work. If he saw me riding my bike or walking down the street, he would follow me. It was very unsettling. We told my parents, who went and spoke to his parents. They were very apologetic, but didn't really do anything other than tell him to leave me alone. The worst thing that happened was when my mom, off work at home with me, and my brother while my dad was working, and he came to our house and let himself in the unlocked front door and started yelling my name, saying he wanted to play with me. My mom freaked out and tried to push him outside, but he was a full-grown man, and my mom is like 5 feet and like 100 pounds. She called the police while locking my brother, me, and her in the bedroom. The police came and hauled him away. His parents put their house on the market, and they moved away shortly after. I didn't know this at the time, but my dad said that he and my mom agreed to drop any charges against him as long as they promised to move away. I had a really normal, loving childhood, except for that traumatic event. I saw our neighbor's collie killed by a driver speeding through the neighborhood. As a young boy, it had real impact because I loved her, and it hurt when he stuck his head out the driver's door window, grinned, and just sped off, leaving the dog dead in the road and me, a kid, in tears. As I once commented, how anyone could be so callous and cruel was beyond my imagination. I crawled through the window at my cousin's house in Kentucky after a week of not being able to reach him by phone at all, and my mom went up to his house to check on him. I had to climb through the window because we knew he was home, and I was small enough to get through pretty easily. I was 16 at the time when this happened, so after getting into the house, it was obvious very quickly something was off due to the smell. I walked through the house till I came upon his bedroom where he had put a .357 in his mouth and done the deed, sitting on the edge of his bed. I still have moments to this day, almost 20 years later, where I smell that same smell, and at times I wake up from terrible nightmares of walking in on it right after, or walking in and him sitting up asking me why headless. This is something I still have issues with. I apologize that this was so long and very dark. I kept this all detail-free as possible and still convey what happened. Going to another person's house and realizing that living in filth and decay and having breathing problems isn't the norm. Having dinner every night and a clean room was just a regular day in their household. Grass is always greener, right? Especially when yours is dead and everyone from school thinks your house is haunted. Shaking my head. Good riddance. I actually don't remember the event much, but when I was really young, 6 years old, I was playing outside and I heard a woman screaming. I was curious, so I went across the street to see a bunch of smoke coming out of the cracks in the front door. Didn't see any flames initially, so I didn't put two and two together right away. My dad saw me across the street in the driveway just staring at the house, and when he investigated what I was doing, he realized the house was on fire. Whole house burnt down. Older woman fell asleep on her couch with a lit cigarette. I was traumatized by fire as a kid, and I was petrified about burning alive in my sleep for quite some time. Dad had to install a fire escape ladder in my room, fire extinguishers, etc. I was obsessed with what to do in case of fires as a kid. No longer an issue, but my parents still tell me stories about how they knew that fucked me up. This is a burner account. When I was 10 years old, my mom took me out behind my grandma's house. She pinned me up against a wall and she told me that I was no longer able to be around my sisters alone, 2 and 4 years old, because I was touching them inappropriately. My mom told me that she understood that I was having manly urges, but that I could no longer be around them. The thing is, I wasn't touching them inappropriately and had never done so. I never understood what was happening. I just wanted it to stop, and my mom never believed me. It was something that hung over me and deeply colored my life for the next several years. It stopped me from being able to be a friend to my sisters. I couldn't be around them without thinking about how what I was doing might be perceived by my parents or those around me. I developed a really bad habit of just lying all the time. I would just lie for no reason, just to get people to believe me. When I was 11, I found out my dad didn't believe that I had ever touched them inappropriately. It felt good to have someone in my corner. I remember being in my shared room with my brother one night and just uncontrollably sobbing. I'll never forget how, for that one night, the pain just went away when my brother said the words, "It's going to be okay." I didn't tell anyone that this happened until I was 18 years old. I was so ashamed and was afraid if people knew that they might actually think that I actually did it. It wasn't till I was 26 and married that I finally confronted my parents and my sister about it. I lost almost all control of my voice, and I couldn't speak except 2 octaves above my normal tone. My mom told me that my grandmother told her I was doing it. My sisters said they never knew any of this happened to me. I got as much closure as I'll ever get and care to get. I just want to forget it ever happened. I've gotten to a point where if I tell a close friend about it, that won't guaranteed burst into tears while talking about it. I had a dog that I absolutely loved. I begged for this dog in a Walmart parking lot a week before my 3rd birthday. My mom said I could have the dog, but that meant no birthday presents or cake, just the dog. She lied. I got presents, cake, and dog. This dog went everywhere with me and did everything with me. Despite being a tiny mutt, he would do his best to protect me from our Doberman who did not like me. In fairness to the Doberman, as a 2-year-old I did stomp on his nuts for some unbeknownst reason, so no hard feelings on not liking me. When I was 5, my mom became a truck driver, so we moved in with my grandparents on their farm. While I was at school one day, Bouncy had gotten into the fence with the donkeys and was kicked in the head. When I got off the bus, I couldn't figure out why he wasn't waiting on me. My grandparents met me outside and told me what had happened, then walked me into where he was. He died 30 minutes after I got home, like he was waiting to see me. I haven't been able to bond with the pet since. Mine wasn't as traumatizing as others I'm reading in this thread, but here we go. My dad knows some dodgy people. That's because when he was younger, he dropped out of school to play guitar and do drugs, etc., until he hit 30 and changed completely lifestyle when he met my mother and started getting into religion, etc. My town is fairly small, so when you went around the center, you'd often meet these people, and although my dad wasn't friends with these people anymore, he'd still stop and say hi. One time, I was about 6 to 7 years old, we met one of them, and after he takes my hand and compliments me, he grabs me and starts running. My dad runs after him and eventually stops him by grabbing him by the arm and almost getting him on the floor. My dad told me he just wanted to play with me, like a game. Thinking about it now, it gives me chills. Probably my parents' breakup. I was playing Peggle on my dad's computer and my mom was coming back from the store. I don't know why this happened really, but when my mom got home, I ran to open the door and she threw a Coke can at my head and it busted. Then my dad and mom yelled at each other for a while and they went to fight in the bedroom. I remember seeing my dad slam her against the bed and choke her till she turned red, and eventually my grandma yelling in the background convinced him to stop. My mom left, got in her car, and floored it down the road, running into mailboxes and things. I remember crying for a long time in the bathroom, and then my mom came back a few hours later and demanded that I go with her. I don't remember the next few years after this. Mild for most people, but trauma is trauma. My 3rd grade teacher slammed the lid of the piano down on my little hands and screamed in my face, "Nobody wants to hear you play." I'm still struggling with that as a 61-year-old musician. The shit sticks in your head. A child in my family. I pray for her every day. Her sister died of a disease when she was 9. 2 years later, her dad killed himself. Her mother up and moved the family far away to another state to live with grandparents. 1 year later, Grandma died. Mom quickly met a man and moved in with him. When the girl turned 12, he began raping her on a daily basis for 2 years. He told her if she tells, he will kill her entire family, including himself, and leave her there all alone. She finally told, and he killed himself in their house with the same kind of gun her father used. When my mother was attacked by my aunt and uncle, I was 13, evening, and I was playing some random game on the family laptop in my room. Then I heard some screams coming from downstairs. I live on the 2nd floor, my uncle and aunt on the 1st, and I run by the door to see what's happening. That's when I see them looking down at my mother, who was near the basement while insulting her. Damn, I still remember her screams, and at that moment it seemed so surreal. I thought it was some absolutely horrifying dream. I ran downstairs and hugged my mother, and that's when my aunt attacked her again, kicking and pulling her hair while I was still hugging her. What makes it worse? They're criminals who stole us money we needed for my sick grandpa, insulted my family in numerous occasions before that, after the attack, and my mother and my grandma almost had a stroke, and my father is already sick, and has been that way for many years. A year and a half have passed, and we still didn't go to court. It's scary to live right beside them, and they still find all the ways to piss us off. A pretty long rant, but I needed it. I still live and happy life though. I try to see the positive stuff. What is the most horrific event that you have personally witnessed? Not safe for work. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. My mom and I had ran to the store, and when we came home, realized our dog had given birth. All the puppies were dead. Not just dead, but somewhat decomposed. My mom picked a puppy up and started rubbing all over it with a cloth, and its skin started to come off. She was crying hysterically, and the dog was running all over the house, getting black goo all over everything. It was horrific and took forever to clean. Poor dog. Pups had been dead inside her for a bit, I guess. It was so sad. She did end up living, though. Had to have her in the vet for days. She ended up taking one of my flip-flops when we got home and acting like it was a puppy. Oh. When I was younger, we had an outside cat in the neighborhood who I was close to. We called him Bubba. One day, after returning from school, I was playing outside in my front yard and saw him. My family and I lived by a highway, and he was trying to cross it from the other side, and as he did, was hit by a large black truck. As soon as it happened, I went running to my parents and told them about it, and they didn't believe me. It took me at least 30 minutes of crying and trying to drag them outside to look. At first, from the front yard, they said it wasn't him, but I knew it was. Eventually, they decided to drive over, taking me with them to go take a closer look, and like I had said before, it was him. The way the truck hit him caused his throat to split open, and you could see the muscle and whatnot bulging out. It wasn't something I wanted to see or ever want to see again. About 10 years ago, I went to get cigarettes at around 11:30 p.m. at night. I went to the corner store, about 10 minutes away from me. When I got there, I noticed a girl sitting on the floor, hugging her knees and looking scared to death. Mascara running down her cheeks, a panicked look in her eyes, flickering to every person coming inside. Another person tried to approach her, and she just screamed as if he had tried to hit her, and he walked away. As I walked to the register and ordered my cigarettes, I asked the person behind the register very quietly, "Is she going to be okay?" The person responded and told me she had been sitting there for 10 minutes. She had run into the store and asked for a phone to call the police. She had been raped and robbed. They were just letting her stay there until the police arrived. She was panicking before because the person trying to approach her was a man. I left there as the police arrived. I still think about her from time to time. I really hope she got through it. My Uber ran over someone and killed her. She was driving a motorcycle on the spot with me in the car. I got outside and checked on her but couldn't dial 911 for like 30 seconds, which I felt like hours. Now, every time I see someone else in a motorcycle that just appears at either side of whatever car I'm in, I get like flashbacks to that day. Me and my dad were in the car going home, and suddenly someone up in a bridge under us threw a bag with a corpse inside. It hit and broke the car window, and the sound of that really scared me. We called the police, but there was a dude who decided to open the bag before the police, and it was pretty gory. My alcoholic, bipolar father having a breakdown in his bedroom. As I cried on the phone to my mom in my room, I heard his 12-gauge shotgun clicking and began screaming into the phone, "Call 911," and rapidly pressing buttons. He came rushing in and asked what was wrong. When I said I heard the gun, he said I was unloading it so I didn't do anything stupid. The next day I was taken out of school for my mental health, given a police escort to his house to get my medications. I also have bipolar and depression as well as other issues. All my drawings were laying on the front lawn. I entered, yelled up the stairs that it was me and a police officer. I walked through the house. That was a mess. The cop noted the smell of gasoline. When walking back to the front door, I realized there were shotgun holes in the walls, one that went out and hit the garage window. I couldn't breathe. I said, "I love you," and left. He later told me he took all my art out because he covered the house in gasoline from basement to the second floor and was going to burn it down with him inside. I was about 13. When I was a kid and my dad was still around, he brought me, my brother, and my sister to KFC. Being young, I was just constantly looking around at everything until I saw this rather tall fellow in line. Being the weird kid I was in M, I tried to visualize my dad next to him to figure out who was taller. Then the guy just randomly fell over. Like the guy didn't slump. It was like his feet were anchored and someone pushed him. Complete 90-degree fall. The sound this guy's head made still freaks me out today. I also then saw his face. His eyes were blood red. Later found out the guy was an addict, so I do not know if it was drugs or the fall that caused this. He was also bleeding from the back of his head. When I was 12, my family got a 6-week-old puppy. It was just my mom, sister, and me at the time. The first night we had the puppy, my mom and sister left to get some things from the store, and I was feeding the new puppy as well as our older dog. Well, during their meal, the puppy got curious about the other bowl, and the other dog didn't like that and just snapped at the puppy. Not usually a big deal, but this was a 6-week-old puppy, and that little snap was enough to puncture its skull right in front of my eyes, and in a split second, I didn't know what to do, so I just dragged the bigger dog into the bathroom and shut her in there and had a breakdown. At some point, I knew I had to call my mom, so I went to get the phone. I had to walk past the tiny puppy in a pool of blood dying while its tail was wagging. That's the part that still makes me feel sick. I regret typing this. An old lady who was a fellow volunteer at the place where I volunteered when I was younger almost got killed in an air raid during the Second World War. She was a 6-year-old child in London during the Blitz in 1940-41. The Luftwaffe hadn't arrived at their usual time that evening, so after having a small portion of sausages, cabbages, and boiled potatoes, her mother put her to bed. Next thing that happened, she was awoken by the loud shrill of the air raid sirens. Then an incendiary bomb went right through her window. As there was no protective tape on the windows, the bomb shattered the glass, which went all across the room and injured her. Then the incendiary bomb went off, and she got trapped in a pile of rubble. It took her mother and a few neighbors to get her out. Then they rushed into the shelter. The old lady told me that she remembered black rats running around everywhere, and of course the raid was still on, so she couldn't sleep at all. Eventually the all-clear siren went at 6 a.m. I just looked in horror at the old lady. She then said to me, "Thunderfart 99, I hope your generation doesn't have to go through a war like this. I just admire the generation that got on with it in World War II. They were tough. Most people in the UK complain now about trains not being here on time, but that's nothing compared to being bombed nights on end." When I was 13, I saw a small kid, probably 4 or 5, dart out into the street from in between 2 parked cars, got hit by a car and was thrown into another parked car. The way the blood sprayed out onto the side of the car was horrifying. So was his mother's screams and sobs. I had never seen that kind of rage and grief before, then, or since. After what felt like an hour, but was probably only 45 seconds, I just ran home and stared at the wall for a long time. I didn't tell my parents for 2 days, and they sent me to a counselor. I won't ever forget that kid. He did not survive. No idea what happened to the driver. When I was in high school, my school first team was playing against our biggest rivals in a rugby match. Long story short, an opposition player was tackled in the air. He landed on his left leg at an awkward angle, and that leg was subsequently crushed by his own weight and the player that tackled him. His shin bone was snapped like a twig, kind of like an MMA fighter Anderson Silva's injury, but higher up closer to the knee. I just remember looking from the stands as this guy screamed horrifically and flailing around on the ground. I can still hear his screams, clear as day. In the early 90s, when I was a paramedic trainee in San Francisco, we had a call to an apartment where there were several firefighters ahead of us. We walked into a room and an emaciated man on a bare mattress looked back at us with huge eyes. The family was in another room. He had AIDS and was home to die. They had no idea how to handle this. Called 911 because watching someone die like this is torture. Dying like this then was torture. Everyone was sort of frozen. No one was talking to the patient. I don't remember anything after I was finally moved to act. I walked across the room, took off my glove and took his hand. Asked him something, I have no idea what. But just like that, it was like things were back in motion. I will never forget this. I can't forget him, but I can't remember it clearly either. Just that brief period is in great detail, nothing before or after. When I was very young, my brother, father, and I were walking out of a grocery store to my dad's truck. Down on the other end of the store from us, a child roughly 3 years old was walking through the parking lot and the mother wasn't watching. A woman in a big 15-passenger van backed up over the child. I was about 10 at the time, 35 now, and I still remember the pop sound that it made. I remember the mother screaming, and I remember the driver screaming after she got out of the van and saw what had happened. I remember the kid on the floor and the pool around her. My dad walked over to see if there was anything he could do. Once he got there, he immediately just turned around and loaded us in the truck. All he said was, "That's why you don't play in the street. There isn't anything that anyone can do for her." This didn't happen to me. It happened to one of my best friends when he was around the age of 10. I know the questions say personally witnessed, but anyway. My friend is only around the age of about 10 when this happened. He lived on a block of flats and apartments, and though he was young, he went to school on his own there and back. It was a warm day, and my friend was on his way back from school. In the summer, there was always a window cleaner that would clean the high-up windows in the flats, and my friend saw this man cleaning. This man had a dog. The cleaner was standing on one railing of the balconies to reach a high place, as he hadn't brought a ladder with him. His dog looked at the cleaner, and the cleaner looked at his dog. Their eyes locked. Suddenly, the dog ran up to his owner to show affection and went up on its hind legs and rested its paws against the cleaner. In an act of doing that, the dog accidentally pushed the man slightly, and he plummeted below. He landed and was killed instantly. The horrifying thing is the cleaner landed within a few meters of my friend. It was a bloody mess, the man barely recognizable. I sat by my wife's bed and held her hand as her breathing became distorted. I watched her eyes fluttering and moving rapidly. She focused on nothing, hadn't spoken a word since the day before. The cancer that had started in her pancreas had spread into her liver before we even knew she had it. Now her kidneys had shut down, and there was nothing that could be done. I had spent the night in her room on a fold-up cot, listening to her breathing as I tried to get to sleep, wondering if she'd still be breathing when I woke in the morning. Not very sleep-inducing, but somehow I drifted off around 3 a.m. I waited by the bed that day. Some of my family were there. My kids, one had come from interstate, my wife's brother and father. Her 80-year-old father was inconsolable and died himself later in that year from neglecting his medicines and not eating. Conversation was limited. It was quiet in the palliative care ward. When first admitted, she had been in the gastro ward. They drained her abdomen due to the buildup of fluids because of the blockages to the liver, but soon passed her on to the oncology ward. Oncology soon determined she was too weak, it was too late for chemo or much other treatment other than painkillers, and they passed her to palliative care. She had been in the hospital for a little over 2 weeks. Palliative care came out and said the words straight away: "She won't make it past Friday." I wrestled the grief back down and was surprised to feel relief. Finally, some people telling me the truth. Finally, she wouldn't be feeling so much pain. They were right, too. I sat by my wife's bed and held her hand. At a little past 6 p.m. on Friday, the 2nd of May, 2014, she breathed out. I didn't witness it, but I caused it, and someone else witnessed it. Second to last Sunday before Christmas one year, I was heading into the kitchen for dinner. Just before we could sit down, I pass out completely, falling onto the floor. When I wake up, I've been put into a seat and made to drink a glass of water. And while I'm passed out, my mom calls my cousin who lives in town and who happens to be a nurse. My sister is waiting in the living room for her. She sees the headlights shining down the road as it snows, and she runs into the kitchen screaming that our cousin just crashed into the brick wall outside her house. Turns out, her brakes were already failing, but hitting an ice patch broke the brakes completely, and she lost control. And she wasn't going too fast because of the fresh and icy snow, which is a good thing because since we lived on a hill with a drop of about 4 to 5 feet from the sidewalk down into our garden, the wall she hit stopped her from going into the garden completely. And with the angle, she would either roll completely in or had hit the cement and brick staircase. Luckily in the UK, she'd be on the right side of the car. Else, in the latter scenario, she'd have hit a step straight on. What is the scariest thing your child has done? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Going to school. She was starting pre-K. Told her to wait, but she was excited and ran into the hallway. As I ran through the door, I saw her looking at me with a big smile, then noticed her right foot out over the stairs and knew she was going down. Jumped, just missed her backpack, and she tumbled down a flight of stairs, then didn't make a sound. I jumped halfway down, gently turned her over, and she started crying. I was so relieved and did what I should do. Looked at the floor and said, "Oh my goodness, you broke the floor, poor thing." Crying stopped. She got up and looked down and laughed at me, saying I was silly. Thank goodness she had that backpack on. It stopped her from hitting her head. When my daughter was 4, she swallowed a toy and it got stuck in her throat. She ran out of her bedroom, lips turning blue and unable to make a sound. I got behind her, put my arm over her stomach, and thumped her on the back twice really hard while pushing up with my arm to get it free. It doesn't end there though. Then she swallowed it, so we had to go to the ER for an x-ray to make sure she'd be able to pass it, which she eventually did. My daughter took her own life. I'm agnostic, so I don't believe in a heaven or any of that. It's scary because I have her older brother. It's made normal things for teenagers to do so scary. I worry about losing him every moment of every day. I'm grieving her and scared to death anytime he drives, when he talks about living on campus, etc. Her actions have hurt so much. No one wants to lose their child, and I can't help but hurt over how alone she must have felt. I'm scared of so much now. I made my son promise to tell me if he ever feels depressed. It's a paralyzing fear. Not a parent, but I know many. The scariest ones are always the kids that have apparently talked to dead people. Some have chatted with relatives that passed away before they were born, others with strangers from the afterlife. I'm sure some of it can be fobbed off as just active imaginations. I think the one that hits me the hardest was a friend's nephew. He always had that old soul vibe about him and would say some of the most obtuse things at times. One day he started telling his mom about Martini, an old man that started visiting his room. Over time, he kept telling her details about him that were far beyond what any 4-year-old kid would come up with. He told her that Martini served in the Pacific Theater during World War II, gave her his regiment details, and even recounted some of the battles he'd fought in and things he'd seen in the war. Wild. Not a parent, but I have a story time. Apparently when I was around 8 or 9, I would start sleepwalking, which the parents thought was completely normal. However, they started to have problems when I actually tried to leave the house a few times, so they started locking both the front and back doors after I went to bed to ensure that I stayed in the house. My sister, when I was 1, almost 2 years old, came running to me and said in a tart way, "Brother, I played with Uncle Herman outside. I told him not to play with the photo that can be broken and hurt. I refuse. No, brother, Uncle Herman was here and already left. My Uncle Herman passed away before she was born. She is a sleepwalker. We used to share a room when she was 10 years old, and I remember one day when I had finished my homework at 3 p.m., I walked into my room and she was standing on her bed rolling her eyes, head lowered and staring at the door. I said, 'Hey, it's still night, go to sleep.' She turned her head back and raised it suddenly. She moved her eyes until she saw her pupils and she said, 'Good boy.' She closed her eyes and collapsed on her bed. It was very scary. Not a parent, I'm a nanny. I had 2 little ones almost run into traffic. First one wasn't usually a problem, but he started running one day towards the road and couldn't hear me chasing him and screaming at the top volume to stop because the cars on the busy road were too loud. He wasn't a problem any day after that either. Second one was being naughty. He gave me that look, you know the one, the "I'm going to be a little shit" disturber look, and tried to run into the road. This happened on the last day of my work week, so guess who had one of those skip-hop backpacks with a leash by the next week, which he hated, but I won't compromise on the safety of my rented children. When my son was little, he was prone to sleepwalking, and I'm prone to night terrors. One night, when he was around 4, he decided to sleepwalk into our bedroom and stand next to me watching me sleep for God knows how long. I roll over, and all I see is something standing there, and I freak the fuck out. I start screaming, which makes him wake up and start screaming, which then wakes my husband because his wife and son are losing their shit. It was like that scene in Step Brothers. Another time, my husband was working the late shift, and it was around 11 p.m., and I hear our back door open. Thinking it was my husband who came early, I called out to him but got no response. I get up to see what was going on to find my son standing outside of the door, fully asleep. I just guided him back to his room and pulled out the good old baby gate and put it on his door. Like if I wasn't waiting for my husband to come home and was sleeping, who knows what would have happened. He unlocked 2 locks in his sleep and got outside. After that, before we went to sleep, we put the baby gate on his door until he outgrew his sleepwalking. On a lighter note, one night around 9 p.m., we were chilling on the couch watching TV and my son sleepwalks out of his room, goes to the kitchen, lifts up the garbage can lid, pees in the garbage can, puts the lid down and pushed the handle like he was flushing. He thought the kitchen was the bathroom. Good thing we already took the garbage out, so it was an easy clean. I'm so glad he grew out of sleepwalking. He still talks in his sleep, which can be hilarious. He mostly talks about trains. I was the kid. TW, eating disorder. I developed an eating disorder at 7 years old. It started with texture issues. I'm autistic, texture issues are common for us, where suddenly every food I put in my mouth felt so gross that I was too nauseated by it to eat. I remember it was during the Olympics opening ceremony and my body felt like it flipped a switch. I'd occasionally be able to down some applesauce or mashed potatoes, but that was it. My mother cried and cried as she tried to get me to eat, but I couldn't do it. After I had wasted away, my dad was trying last-ditch efforts, and I cried because I still couldn't eat. Then I saw him cry for the first of only 2 or 3 times in my life so far, and that was 25 years ago. He just broke down and went to his bedroom to cry, and I felt really bad. That eating disorder had lasting effects for years and still does sometimes. I blame it for my fast resting heart rate after I learned in health class that your body eventually chews away at the lining of your heart. I think it's also why I'm so much shorter than the rest of my family. I think I missed a growth spurt or 2. I've gone an entire week or more without eating anything except 3 jelly beans someone gave me to try because I simply forgot to eat until I collapsed at soccer practice and couldn't get back up again. I also still can't eat when I'm sad or anxious, and I have GAD, so that's a lot. But because I won't be able to keep it down, the Olympics have been a trigger since it happened, just because that was the turning point, so I try to avoid them. My mother still gets extra worried about me during crisis because I can barely even drink water then, and my dad is always extra considerate for family gatherings when food is involved and goes the extra mile to bring me food I can eat. On Christmas Eve, back in 2008, we had just gotten home, a house we do not live in anymore, from a Christmas party, and her mom sent my brother and I to bed. Now I slept through the beginning of this, but was woken up by the screaming. Sometime around 2 a.m., my brother, still half asleep, wanders into my mother's room and starts whispering something about the eyes that were watching him from his closet. Something about the way he was saying it really freaked her out, like enough to make her think someone had broken into the house. She was kinda correct. Still terrified as to what my little brother was talking about, she bravely went into his room to investigate, baseball bat in hand. The closets in almost every bedroom in that house were the kinds with the wooden slats, total horror movie potential for someone to be hiding inside. Well, turns out there was something inside the closet. When she turned on the lights, she clearly saw 4 raccoons staring at her through the slats in the closet. This is when she screamed in surprise and terror. I woke up and rushed in, but couldn't really do anything. She told us to keep out of the room as she called our next door neighbor for help. By the time they entered the room again, the raccoons had disappeared. At first, our neighbor thought we were crazy, till a little investigating revealed that a hole about the size of a small plate had been opened in the ceiling of the closet that led right outside. We don't know if the raccoons caused it or merely took advantage of it, but we got it repaired as soon as we could. Either way, it was a wild way to wake up on Christmas morning. Our mom still likes to tell the story and notes just how creepy my brother sounded when he tried to wake her up. TLDR. My brother wakes up my mom really early on Christmas and creeps her out, talking about the eyes watching him from his closet. Turns out, raccoons had gotten into the house via a hole in the closet's ceiling. So, not a parent, but my mom operated her own daycare in the basement of our 3-story home, so me and my 3 other siblings were raised around my mom's daycare. I spent 19 years of my life surrounded by kids. So, through the years of seeing all sorts of different unique personalities of the numerous kids that went to my mom's daycare, there was this one child that will forever plague my memories. I was a freshman in high school at the time, and on this one particular day, my mom, who had to do her daily pickup for a group of kids from an after-school program and was dealing with her employee who called in sick at the last minute. So, needing someone to watch the kids while she did her pickup, and me having years of experience handling kids at this point, she asked me if I could watch over the kids while she was gone. It was a group of 7 kids, ranging from 3 to 5 in age, and at this point, I knew the temperament and personalities of every single kid that I was watching, since I've already watched this particular group of kids a handful of times before. So I knew which ones were the ones that were more on the rowdy side, which were 2 of the 7 kids, and needed to be watched a little more closely than the others. On this particular day, I had homework I needed to get done, so I had them gathered on the large sofa we had in the small section of the daycare that was set up specifically to watch TV, and started sorting through movies. I gave a few options for them to agree on and ended up on playing Flubber. And after a few minutes of making sure the group of kids weren't messing around and were paying attention to the movie, I started working on my homework. I made sure to look up from my homework every few minutes just to make sure they were still focused on the movie, and at one point, while I was in the middle of writing a long answer to a question on my homework, I heard some soft thumping noises coming from the sofa the kids were sitting on. And right as I look up to see the cause of the noise, I sat frozen in shock for a couple of seconds. I almost couldn't believe what I was seeing. Cameron, who was 4 at the time and was also one of the more rowdy ones out of the group of kids, had somehow grabbed hold of one of the couch pillows and had proceeded to put it over Jared, who was also 4 and was also a victim to Cameron's bullying, head pushing Jared flat on his back on the couch, and then disturbingly enough sat on the pillow and started to bob his body up and down, all the while he had this creepy smirk on his face. Poor Jared, unable to move his head, flailed his arms in panic. I bolted out of the chair and over to Cameron. I quickly lifted Cameron off Jared and snatched the pillow off his head. Poor Jared's face was bright red with tears and snot all over his face. Jared, who was shaking and rasping for air, clumsily wrapped his arms around my stomach and pressed his damp face onto my chest and proceeded to sob, and at that point, it felt like my heart broke. I gently held Jared while rubbing his back, trying to comfort him, and after a minute or two his breathing became more stable and his crying faded into soft sniffles. I reassured him that he was okay, and after wiping his face clean, I sat him back on the couch. After confirming Jared was okay, I snapped my attention on Cameron, who was giggling at the situation and had to take a moment to compose the anger building in me. I sternly called Cameron's name, which brought Cameron's giggles to an abrupt stop. "Cameron, come here right now," I said sharply. Hesitating, Cameron's face showing the internal debate on if he was going to listen or not, so I said in an even louder, darker tone, "Now!" Cameron flinched, but slowly walked up to me. I got down to his eye level, in which he tried to turn his head, but I quickly said, "Look at me." He reluctantly turned his head back and looked into my eyes. I said, "Cameron, you know better. You know what you did could hurt Jared. Don't you ever do that again. Do you understand?" Cameron lightly nodded while pouting. "No, I want you to tell me that you understand." After a second of silence, Cameron, in a whiny, light whisper, said, "I understand." "Now you need to go apologize to Jared right now." Cameron was squirming in place, acting impatient, let out a loud, high-pitched whiny, "No!" And without a single warning, I scooped Cameron up and plopped him down in a high chair and strapped him in, all while he started wailing and screaming, "No, I'm sorry, Jared." To which I said, "Nope, too late. I gave you your chance to apologize. Now you're going to sit in timeout." To which he kept letting out loud squeals. I turned the high chair facing the opposite direction from the TV, and after he let out a couple of high-pitched screams, I cut him off. "If you keep that up, then you're only going to be in timeout longer, and you won't be able to go to the park with the others when Miss Gina gets back." That's what the kids call my mom. As soon as I said that, he instantly became quiet, and I went back over to the other kids and resumed playing the movie. And not even 5 minutes later, my mom and the group of kids she picked up walked through the door, and my mom, who saw Cameron in the high chair, had a, well, that's not surprising, look on her face. And after getting all of the kids settled in and focused on the movie, I told my mom what happened, and she ended up having a stern talking to him as well as informing his parents. This kid has done so much more, but this is the one incident I will always remember.